Hello, I'm Lisa Ballard. Welcome to Ed Table Talk Unplugged, an Independence Anniversary Special Edition, 50 Years Progressing in Education. This show is a production of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training. In this edition, we dialogue with Her Excellency Dame Ivy Dumont, a trailblazer as the first female Governor General of the Bahamas and the first female Minister of Education. We will explore her remarkable contributions to the field of education and the years she dedicated to serving and advancing this noble cause. Dame Ivy, thank you so much for joining us. It is indeed my honor and privilege to be able to speak with you today.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad to meet you and your companions. I mean, I haven't had this kind of treat for a long time.
Oh, well, the equal treat, trust me, for me and all of my colleagues here today.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Throughout your extensive career in education, you held various positions ranging from student teacher to deputy director of education and then on to the Minister of Education and Youth. I would like to discuss the changes and advancements you witnessed and implemented in the Bahamian education system during this period. So, you embarked on your education career as a teacher, progressing to the positions of head teacher and education officer. In these roles, you participated in shaping curriculum and policies. How did you contribute to the development and implementation of educational strategies that catered to the needs of the students of the Bahamas?
Well, we have a week, so let's try and see if we can reduce it to a couple of days. Actually, anything that I've accomplished in the work that I've done over the years has been because I had good people working with me and people who were willing not only to share what they knew, but also to find out what we didn't know to be able to make progress. As a teacher, I started as what's called a student teacher in those days. Because we didn't have any training. We just went, a high school student went straight into the classroom. It was 2 years after I started to teach that the Teachers College was formed. So as the first students there, I had 2 years of training. And during that time, I got to know the people who became names in education and in other parts of the public service. Some you would recognize. Eula Delancey, her daughter is now retired. Mr. Joaquin, who became a Family Island Commissioner. All those were my college trainee colleagues. And so when I came out of the college, they started what was called a demonstration school, because it was understood that you needed a place to help to further train the teachers after they'd had the input now to do the practical work. And with the cooperation of ZNS, we were able to set up a little studio at the demonstration school where the students could come over and do practical work. And ZNS beamed that to the Family Islands so that they could understand what was going on as well. I spent 2 years there and received the trainees and facilitated them. So not only was I helping them, I was learning from them about all the islands, what the islands had, what they didn't have. For example, I had 2 Androsians in my team, and they detested the smell of coconut. I loved coconut. We had no coconuts on Long Island. They had coconuts to burn in Andros. So I was learning the history and geography of the Bahamas from them. So when I say I had good people around me, people came into my life who were able to help me learn enough that I then could be able to help others to develop themselves. We had a training mistress. We used to call her Ma P or Montessori. She loved the Montessori method. And she insisted that we should do a lot of things that were not normal. For example, we had to read around the Training College, which is where C.C. Sweeting is now.
Okay.
That was where our college was.
So they made you do manual labor
Oh
around the
yeah,
school.
oh yeah, and the boys had to help with we went in there with broken down buildings.
Oh,
So the
okay.
boys had to actually help to repair them. The girls had to sew to help to make any curtains or anything that was necessary. So people like Susan Wallace and those who knew how to sew, we were all involved in that. Anyway, as it turned out, because we had gotten to know Mrs. Prendergast as an itinerant trainer while we were still student teachers in the schools, we had a very good relationship. And then when we were able to be trainers, so to speak, she brought us into another level of training. Now, then I went on to be a teacher with the famous T.G. Glover at his school. I think Mr. Glover has been described as a very strict and strong man. He was all that, but he was also a very good trainer, because that was going into high school, and I hadn't been in one since I left Government High. And then after that, I went as a head teacher to Eastern Prep 1, which is the building right in back of the Tribune. It's not a school anymore.
Right.
And so there began my my work, my real work.
Okay.
I should mention that in those days, there wasn't a lot of respect for teachers,
No.
and certainly not female teachers,
Why is that?
because I guess the male psyche, whatever it was, but I think we helped them a lot, because they weren't able to get away with all the things they used to before this crowd of young women particularly were graduates of the college, because
Right.
at least we felt we had a certificate, we
That's
had a
right.
diploma,
And you had the
we
power
had the
of
power
education.
absolutely. So at Eastern Prep 1, when I went there, I succeeded Carl Francis's wife. He was married again subsequently, but they had just come back from England, where she was trained further in education while he went to further develop his mathematical skills. And she had started taking in 5-year-olds, which was against the law, quote unquote, because the entry age was 6. But meeting them there, I couldn't send them home, right? So then I began to develop a 5-year-old program with the teachers who were already in the school. And that, I think, was probably the beginning of what we now have as the preschool. So parents who wanted their children in school early, like the Jackson Burnside, the Foxes from the Fort Hill, they weren't asking for anything that they didn't know about, because many of them had lived abroad. And so we had our 5-year-old groups then, from then and forward. Subsequently, when I became involved with the Teachers Union, Mrs. Walker, who was an American by birth, picked up on this, and we began to push for 5-year-old entry altogether.
Wow.
And in 1956, I think it was, or thereabouts, the government agreed that we could take in children at 5. So when I say it was not me, it was a combination of people and events that would have led to whatever developments occurred. But that was the first one that I can remember.
You implemented the preschool program,
Well, we-
and your team.
we began to think about it. And then you had people like Thelma Gibson at the time, where the school, the preschool near Meeting Street, Thelma Gibson was a renowned educator. She used to be responsible for that. She agreed that she would take children a little younger than that as a possibility to get into 4-year-olds. And in that building, I'm not sure if it's still there, but was set up so that the trainees could watch with a, what you call it, not a one-way glass? Yes, a one-way glass.
Okay.
To watch a teacher in the classroom
With
while
the
they were
students.
observing. Yes, so that was
Okay.
the first place. I hope it's still there, but that was where we started the real training of preschool teachers.
Okay. That's fascinating. Okay, so serving as Deputy Director of Education, we're moving down this line now. You held a crucial leadership role in the public education system. What were some of the key initiatives or reforms which were spearheaded by you or which you were a part of during this period to improve the quality of education and enhance learning opportunities for students across the country as the deputy?
I think the biggest part of our development as far as curriculum is concerned occurred about then. We had two major sections. We were by this time the education had moved into the Collins House, and there were two buildings in the backyard. I think they were burnt some years ago. But in one of them we had what we call the management division. That was my direct supervisory responsibility, and Charlie Saunders and Sadie Curtis and Mr. Tynes, Garvin Tynes. They were the three people who worked with me.
Okay.
Mr. Tynes was responsible for management in the Family Islands, Mr. Saunders for New Providence secondary, and Sadie for primary.
That's quite a legendary cast of characters right there.
They were, and they were people who were devoted to getting the job done. On the other side of the little lane and the other building was the curriculum division. Now, before I went into education headquarters, I was the principal at Oaksfield Primary School. That was a new building which I opened.
Okay.
So that was also a part of the college training, because they used to come over from the college, which is where I think it's a T.A. Thompson they call it now, the school. But they would come over there to do their in-house training with me.
Okay.
You might remember the name of, what was his name now? He was a legend. He used to be in charge of the Parliamentary Registration Department. Just retired the other day. But anyway, he was a science man, and he would go to the hospital and get things like parts of lungs and all that sort of stuff. All the children in the school wanted to be in his class because this was different.
Right.
So I continued this business of supervising people from the college. But essentially, when I went from Oaksfield Primary School to the office, my job was to emphasize the organization of schools. So organization and supervision. If we were going to have classes, how many people were going to be? How many could we afford?
Okay.
What were the teachers going to have to prepare themselves for or to do, and so on. So that was my responsibility. Charlie did the secondary, Sadie did the primary, Mr. Tynes did the Family Islands. But we all had an opportunity to participate, particularly because the name Cecil Wallace Whitfield might mean something to you. He was the Minister of Education.
Yes,
and it was his idea to establish a training college in San Salvador.
Okay.
And so while we were responsible basically for Nassau and go to the Family Islands now and then, we all had to go to San Salvador.
Okay.
Funnily, we didn't have any direct communication, but the Ministry of Works at that time used to send their people out to various Family Islands to do whatever repairs and maintenance that had to be done. There was no such thing as local government. So they would call in and say what was required, and then Ministry of Works would hire a plane. And so if there were 4 seats, that minister would call my minister and say, we have 2 vacant seats going to San Salvador, do you have anybody? So we learned to have a bag packed. So if they call it, you come home, pick up your bag, and head to the airport.
Wow, on call.
On call. So we did that for many years. So
Okay.
we assisted in the training of people down at San Sal as well. But back to the main thing, the management was one side, and then they had the curriculum development. A lady by the name of Edna Manaya had been brought here as a recent reading specialist. She was from Nashville by way of New York, and so on, very highly educated. But once she got here, it was realized that she had had experience and training in curriculum development. So she became the leader for the curriculum development, and we had people such as, we set up various categories. You had what was her name now? Juliet Barnwell. I think she did geography or history, something like that. And then you had the mathematics people. You had art. Hervis Bain was in charge of art, and so on. So each of those persons was given the responsibility to set up groups of people from the schools, teachers, any teachers or anybody else they wished, to set up a group to develop the curriculum in that specific area.
Okay.
So up to that point, I suppose you'd ask, well, what did we do before? You did what you felt like doing pretty much. There was no curriculum as we now know it. So that development went on over a very long time, as you can imagine, because it was preparing something, testing it out, and then going on to something else and so on. So we did that for quite a long time before we were able to meet with teachers who, many of whom had worked on the process, and said, well, as of now, this is what we're going to be teaching at grade 1 level, at grade 2 level, at grade 3 level, in each of these specialist areas.
Okay.
All right? That, I think, that was one of the most satisfying jobs, in the sense that it was bringing people who were in education, who were parents, whoever we thought could help to put together what we should learn, what we should teach, and for those who were experts, how we should teach it.
So all education stakeholders were included in this process of building the curriculum for our schools. That's wonderful. It's now time for a short break, and when we return, we will continue our historical discussion with Her Excellency Dame Ivy Dumont. Please stay tuned.
Life is a marathon, not a sprint, and high school is less than a quarter of that marathon journey. Make your years in high school count, even if you are only able to obtain a minimum grade to pass a class on exam. I don't always get the grades I want, but that never stops me from trying my best. What matters is that you always do your best and nothing less. So, the next time you feel like giving up on school because your best might not be good enough, keep going, because life is a marathon and school is less than a quarter of that journey.
Yes, Auntie, I found a gun on school cameras.
What? A gun? Where? Show us.
Students, if you happen to find a weapon like a gun, knife, or anything that can harm you or others, do not touch it. Report it to a teacher, school resource officer, or any other responsible adult and tell them what you found right away.
This public service announcement was brought to you by the Communications Section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with the Royal Bahamas Police Force.
Don't be no fool, stay in school. Let your mind become a tool. What's going on, y'all? It's your favorite entertainer coming to encourage all the parents out there. Make sure your children in school. Why they ain't in school? You know if they're in school or not. Listen, education is key and is very important to the future. We have future leaders in your household. You have the next prime minister, future doctors, lawyers, practitioners. Give me another big word. You all know the people who make lots of money right in your household, but in order for them to get there, to the money, to the goal, to the success, to the CEO position, they must be focused in school now. I know the pandemic got them a little lazy, but we back face to face and we need to jump right back into it. And to the kids who are watching this, I want to encourage y'all to stay focused in school, stay encouraged. Sometimes things might get a little hard, might get a little rough, but you have people there to help you. You have your teachers, you have counselors, you have administrators to help you with any challenges you might have in school or out of school. They are there to help, and they wouldn't be able to help you if they don't know that you need help. You are a future leader, you are a world changer, you are advocate, you are the solution to somebody's problem. But you gotta stay focused now. You gotta get through grade 1 to grade 20. How far does 12. Great, I mixed the numbers. Grade 12. Stay focused. Go to college, go to institution to learn a trade, but just keep going, stay encouraged, go to school, get your education, get your degree, and people like me are waiting for you, world changer. So come, I'm waiting for you. I can stay right here and I can wait for you till you reach.
Welcome back to Ed Table Talk Unplugged, Special Edition, 50 Years Progressing in Education. Our very special guest, Her Excellency Dame Ivy Dumont, has been informing us on changes and advancements she witnessed and implemented in Bahamian education during her illustrious career in education. Let's get back to it.
When we had established the evaluation of the body of the people who worked there, they just have A, B, C, D, and E. That was you might remember that. And those ACRs we have to prepare for on behalf of these people at the end of the period. Now, Clement was an absolutely able musician, completely devoted to his children and to the teachers. But Clement was not a record-keeping person.
Okay.
He'll find his music wherever it was, but not. So when it was time to evaluate, I recall sitting in the back, near the back window with Clement, and I'm saying, "Now let's go." He said, "Now look, let's save some time. Record keeping, put D. Put D. But now we could talk about the rest of them." And I'm looking out the window, and there was this person with a lawnmower, a huge lawn across the backyard, and he was just up and down, cutting up paper plates and whatever else was on the ground. Couldn't think to pick them up and then do the grass. So I said, "Clement, look," he said, "That's why he doing what you doing, and that's why I doing what I doing." And but we had good times as well.
Yes, I could tell. I could tell.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to Minister of Education.
Oh, dear.
And this is a position that you would have held from 1995 to 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a significant impact on the education system during your tenure there. What were the primary goals and initiatives for improving education during that period? Now, I know certain things were done, like the implementation of school boards across all of the schools, and the introduction of the teaching pathway, or I should say the teaching career path. Tell us more about the things that came about when you were the Minister of Education and Youth.
Well, the career path was one that I felt very good about, because it's hard to think how the evaluation of a teacher in the classroom could then put that teacher in an administrative position without any training, without any guidance, more or less. And I thought there had to be a way of assisting people to go through a progression. And with the cooperation of the Teachers Union, which was very involved with us, we were able to come up with this program where you would have a master teacher. Master teacher doesn't do the same things as a beginning teacher would have to do. So that was fine. But how it happened was that I had been in the cabinet for a while as the Minister of Health. And so I saw how that worked, and I thought it was a great idea. And when I went to Health, there were so many things that needed to be attended to that I thought, what a great idea, let's have a cabinet. So I called together all the leadership people from the hospitals, from Grand Bahama, from the Family Islands where there were doctors and so on, and we used to have a cabinet meeting of the health leadership.
Okay.
So that was in order already there. So when I went to education, I just continued
You
it.
did the same.
And so we set up a cabinet meeting. First we started very frequently, and then we had it less so as time went on, we got on. But the main thing was that all the people needed to know what was going on at the correct time. And so there was immediately less complaining and moaning and groaning about people. This one wasn't doing this and the other wasn't doing that. Well, they couldn't very expect it if they didn't know.
No.
So when we had our meeting, I guess we had it the same time as the regular cabinet on Tuesday, if there was a matter that had to be discussed, you had to put it on the agenda ahead of time. And I had the most competent secretary, I think, ever. I'll tell you a story about her in a bit. But she would have that ready. Everybody had their agenda when we went into the meeting. Aside from the cleaning part, the time part is very important to me. So they also learned very early that if you came late, you didn't come in. Or alternatively, you had to have a very good reason. I had to know it in front. So there was no, I don't want excuses about coming to
Must be punctual.
Yes, it's important.
It is important. You must respect
and if
other
you want
people's time.
you ringing the bell for the children to come at 9 o'clock, why you can't reach there by 9 o'clock. Anyway, that's an aside. So we started with the cabinet meetings. So each individual would, if there was something to be, would have to explain what he or she meant and concerning his item on the agenda. So everybody knew what everybody else was doing. So if you were a curriculum person, it wasn't a question of whether the management person was getting in your way or some such thing. And I think that was perhaps the fundamental part of getting the job done there.
Just this open dialogue.
Absolutely.
And transparency.
And also the ideas that flowed from the other people, because someone might have come in with an idea, with something that was really troubling, but when the others had made their contribution to it, it wasn't so bad anymore.
No.
And so we were able to agree that this then would be the pathway. And when the minutes came out, everybody got the minutes. So if there was an error, you had to have it corrected immediately. And if there is not an error, when we come the next time, you're supposed to report on what it is that we agreed to do. How far have you progressed in getting it done? And if you aren't getting it done, why? And so it's not just for me to know. I'm just a minister. I'm here, as they'll say, ministers come and ministers go, but the public service goes on forever.
That's the truth.
And it is a fact. So to be the minister is to be there temporarily. But those other people are there, quote unquote, permanently. They're there to go somewhere else in the service, but they are there. Why not take advantage of all of the good things that they're able to do? And I think having set that standard or set that program type availability of myself and them.
Yes.
When they came in, they came prepared. And I think eventually what I began to understand was that in some cases they were negotiating with one another and talking about it and setting up before they came to the meeting. So
they can be very well prepared.
Precisely.
Yes.
Precisely. So that, I think, was the overall controlling as well as uplifting and training from my point of view. And I believe that because of that, the ones who have gone on to do other things have pretty much adopted, if not the same
structure.
Similar structure.
Yes. Okay. I know that you would have, during your tenure, added additional public school libraries.
Oh, heavens,
right here in New Providence. I know about the library on Carmichael Road, the one in Elizabeth Estates, and on East Street South.
Confession is good for the soul. Let me tell you, the Prime Minister was a family island boy, as he would say, and he had some very, very strong ideas himself. So whenever he had anything in his mind like that, he would get it out immediately. What do you think of this? How could we go about this? And so on. So the libraries, that was his big idea. There had to be libraries.
Okay.
There were other things as well, but that one stands out. And the one in Carmichael,
yes, ma'am.
I think he probably built that one.
Okay.
But he was very good and very interested in education. So I had all the support I needed from above and all the support I needed from below. And so whatever accomplishments could be attributed are not mine, they're ours.
Yes.
And that, I think, it made me feel better, because I think by the time I left, some of them could have been the minister for all that matter. But they knew pretty much what was going on. I promised to tell you a story about my secretary.
Yes, you did. Please.
My secretary is Janice Davis. I think you knew her. She used to work in education at some point after I left. Janice she greeted me when I went to the Ministry of Health. She was the minister's secretary. And we got along, our house on fire. And then when I went to education, I just went. I didn't think of asking about her. And then one day, she asked me, and I asked the Prime Minister, and he said, sure, let her come over for education as well. And so she looked after me all the time I was there, till I retired. But she sent a note when I was retiring, which was really, I think I have it in a folder somewhere. She said she would never forget the first day I asked her to do a letter for me. Oh, that was the other thing. I didn't write letters from scratch. I said, the secretary will do a draft. Something comes in, she does the draft, she gives me the letter with the draft of what she thinks should be in it. If it's right, go. If it isn't right, well, we amend it. According to her, and I'm going to repeat that, according to her, when she got her first draft back, it looked like the Red Sea.
So I would say it had a few more amendments than she would have anticipated.
But do you know, by the time we had done our 5 years or whatever it was, I could just look at her stuff and sign it and let it go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
Talk about improvement. From the Red Sea to crystal waters. Well, what do we do if we don't improve, huh? And that's what we must do.
But that's what it is. What is education? I have a little trainee thing that I used when I was at the bank. People would come in to be interviewed, and they could tell me every degree they have and so on. And I think that's wonderful. I believe in degrees too. I'm as education as you can get. But there are other things that make you, you. So, if you only can emphasize to me what you have learned, that doesn't help me much about what you can do. I want to know, what are you prepared to do?
Yes.
Or what have you done that helps me to know that you can do what I want you to do?
There has to be certain characteristics outside of earning a degree that can make a person good for a job.
So you know my story then. I do a big circle, and I do it in 4 parts. The first one is education, schooling. Schooling comes first. The total thing is education. Some people believe that schooling is all. It's not. After you get your intake, you have to get some training.
Yes.
Being a carpenter, by knowing what is a saw and what is a screwdriver and what's a nail, doesn't help you.
It certainly does not.
All right.
Because if you don't have hands-on, you won't know how to use that
So you have
saw.
the training.
Yes.
When you have after the training, you have to have some experience to be worthwhile. And experience is cumulative. It doesn't happen overnight.
No.
It's cumulative. But addressing all of those, the big one for me is your attitude. So you could have all the schooling in the world, all the training in the world, all the experience in the world. If you have a bad attitude, you are not of any use to anybody, not even to yourself.
That is correct, and I agree with that wholeheartedly.
So that is my basic training mode. And so when people talk to me about what they know and emphasize a lot about what I know, I'm a little bit skeptical of what they're willing to do.
Wow. We need to implement this in human resources.
Go to it.
We need to get this
free.
done.
It's free. I'm not selling it. I used to get paid for it when I did it in the private sector. But but seriously, this I think is something that has grown out of working with people of various sorts in various areas of life, and particularly as we have come into the era of higher education, that some people get the attitude that if John Doe has a bachelor's degree and Mary Jane only has an associate degree, she can't do what he can do. It's not true. Not true.
That's right.
You have to put the whole thing together. I would rather have an associate degree with some skill and experience and a willingness than to have a doctorate who wants to sit and look at me stupidly.
That's right. That's right. A good and constant professional who can add to the job that they're going into has to have the full package. And I completely agree. Attitude. The right attitude.
Well, I think we got along well because some people mightn't have had the right attitude, but that could be taught as well. You can learn how to improve your attitude.
You can bring them around.
Yes. There are people who might act in a way that seems to suggest that only I can do this or only I am good enough for this or something. So sometimes you do have to pull that person aside and have a word.
Yes.
And
there is no I in team.
Some people accept, some people protest, and some reject. You make up your mind which one you want to do if you're going to work in my environment. So we didn't have any real problems.
It doesn't sound like you did to me. Especially after you would have put that structure in place, when it sounds to me like everyone was eager to get that item on the agenda and then go back and work at it and be able to report positively on it. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, I had one person, and I must say of maybe a dozen or more, I don't remember exactly, but I had one person who didn't fit. Clearly, obviously, everybody recognized didn't fit. And I would not normally do this, but on the occasion that I'm talking about, I did do it when it was a male, and when he reared up, as I called it, and I said, you know, I can cut you off at the knee or at the ankle. I don't know which one you prefer.
Wow.
But you are being excused. That takes care of that.
Well, Dame Ivy, there comes a point, I believe, in everyone's career, especially those who are holding positions of authority, when you have to exert that authority.
Absolutely, and
if
you don't do that, you get cut off at the knees
That's
or the
right.
ankles, right?
And what you do is you give a power, even maybe a credence to those who would come behind and feel like they too can rear, right? So it's nothing negative. You'd have to know when to hold them and when to fold them. Yes, so yeah, and I think in every career of someone in authority, they will meet at some point in their career where they will have to cut someone off at the knees or the ankles.
But I have been blessed. I really have been blessed in all my work experience, both in the public service and in the private sector, because I spent 13 years in the private sector. And I was able, I think fairly to say, that there were some accomplishments, but they were not mine, they were ours, and I always look at it that way.
Now time for a short break, and when we return, we will continue our historical discussion with Her Excellency Dame Ivy Dumont. Please stay tuned.
Education and learning are so very important. This is why schools should always be a safe place. Many say that being picked on or teased is just a part of growing up, that everyone goes through it and it is no big deal, and you should just toughen up. Yes, many people were picked on and made fun of, but that does not make it right or okay. Bullying is behavior that is purposely intended to hurt, embarrass, or exclude someone, and can be physical harm, verbal abuse, or public social rejection. As an advocate for all students, I want you to know that you have the power to take a stand and stamp out bullying in our schools.
Parents, if your child reports being bullied, reach out to the school to ensure positive resolutions. If you are being bullied or know about bullying, I am asking you, begging you to help your school counselors to decrease the incidences of bullying on our campuses. Working together, we can put an end to this. We want all of our students in school, so let's keep it safe.
School is like a bus ride. Just like any other ride, there are turns that make you slow down. Sometimes you run into potholes or roadblocks, and your driver has to take another route. Don't let that stop you from reaching your goals. Just keep going. If your bus breaks down on your ride, just keep going. You're going to get to your destination. Even if it's hard, go to school, or even if you feel like it, or if you think your goals are too far away, don't stop. Just keep going.
Hi, I'm Dyson Knight. Yo! Schools are open. It's been a year, and still some of our students have not returned to class. Teachers, we are appealing to you to use that innovation, that extraordinary effort that you used during the pandemic to make sure that our children continue their education. Take to Twitter, Facebook, Discord, whatever platform you believe necessary in order to find our students. Be the beacon of light that attracts these children to you so that you can instill the confidence in them that they need in life to succeed. I'm counting on you. The Bahamas needs you. Let's find every child.
Welcome back to Ed Table Talk Unplugged, Special Edition, 50 Years Progressing in Education. Our very special guest, Her Excellency Dame Ivy Dumont, has been informing us on changes and advancements she witnessed and implemented in Bahamian education during her illustrious career in education. Let's get back to it. You know, I admire your humility. I admire it. And I'm sitting here with Her Excellency Dame Ivy Dumont. We're looking at a woman from student teacher all the way to governor general, and yet still this humility. It's leaving an impression on me, to say the least.
We used to learn a song when I was in school in Buckley's. He that is down needs fear no fall. He that is low no pride. He that is humble ever shall have God to be his guide. Do you know that one? I can't sing. I'm not going to do that to you.
No, but it does remind me of the chapter in Daniel. I believe it is chapter 4 that speaks about pride going before the fall. And I'm thinking, right. And I'm thinking that the words of that song, maybe that writer was inspired by what he read in Daniel, perhaps. He or she.
Could have been a she.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, this has been a joy.
Yes, it has.
You have a last question for me?
Yes, I do. The Bahamas High School Diploma Program was introduced in 2014 to track and monitor student learning outcomes. You played a pivotal role in the conceptualization of the Bahamas High School Diploma prior to that date. Can you say why you determined its introduction to be critical?
I believe that grew out of my experience at the trust company. I went to NatWest Trust as the training officer. We had a couple of promotions there, but essentially I was a training person. And when I arrived, practically every senior trust officer or trust officer was an expatriate. And this was about the time that the emphasis was being placed on Bahamianization. I don't know whether I was recruited because of that, but in any event, I was recruited to be the trainer, and I found that we had trainees and we had trainee trust officers, assistant trust officers, but nobody at the higher levels. And there were about 4 or 5 categories. And I recall the senior officer saying to me, we need to have a program that would allow people to be promoted depending upon their certification. But after I had interviewed the individuals, and that was another story, I was interviewing them individually, and I remember him saying to me, oh, you're pampering them. But eventually, that same person agreed with Dr. Kevin Bethel and myself to start the first bachelor's degree in finance at the college.
Okay.
Because that, and you know, we don't have the trainee programs anymore, but that's where it is. So people who get a finance degree at the college, well, university now, are accepted into any of the financial institutions because that was what they all agreed to, together with the central bank. Basie Donaldson was very instrumental in that as well, because he was the governor of the central bank at the time.
Okay.
But going through these cases where I had some people who had degrees in finance, some who had degrees in accounting, who were working in that field, but did not have the actual detailed knowledge of trust work, which was what our work was. We had to figure out how to get them trained. At the time, what is now BTVI was just the technical school, and Dr. Higgs was the head there. He worked with us to have an evening institute for our trust trainees who wanted to improve and get their certification. Well, some people did, some people couldn't. I mean, when you think of a full day's work and going to school again after a degree, it's difficult.
Yes,
So we did a lot of in-house work, and we also arranged for the trainees at a certain level to have a year secondment to the UK so that they could get on-the-job training and experience and so on. But one group that stood out to me was led by a young man, lovely gentleman, who had a slight stammer. And of course you're dealing with international financial people, and so he didn't get many opportunities to even sit in on a discussion to know what was going on. And it bothered me. So I asked him about his speech, and I said, would you like some help? He said yes. He didn't know, nobody knew about the program that was at the Ministry of Education where people could get help with speech therapy. So he was willing to do that, and he did it for a year, and his speech improved considerably. He was excellent at what he did, but he had this problem. And then, of course, he was kept back and so on. So what was eventually agreed, and I must say, my general manager was willing. He was very willing to go along with me to see if it would work. But we decided to produce a form to have him grandfathered into the next level. And that meant that I had to understand all the specifics that needed to be done by a trust officer. To write the letter, to do the accounting, to this, to that. I forget how many, but all the criteria. There must have been 19 or 20. It was a long list of them. And I said, fine, if then he is able to do all of these things, he could be put to the next level because we know he can do them. He cannot explain them perhaps as well as somebody else.
But he understands.
He understands and he can get it done. And that grandfathering of that, he's a very young man then. He's passed away now, God took him home. But that grandfathering in gave me the idea when I went to education. There are students in our schools who are never going to get a BGCSE in the fullness of what we used to expect. I don't know what it is now. I haven't been touched for a long time. But they certainly could have some sort of certification to say what they are able to do.
Yes, they can. And you know, in education right now, it's being implemented that you can obtain different diplomas. We're making a way. Minister Hannah Martin and the team that she would have assembled to review the Bahamas high school diploma and the criteria for obtaining it, they're making paths so that based on what you're good at, what you are achieving, what you understand, what you may excel in, that will be the pathway for obtaining that diploma. And that's including technical
I'm the first
and
of
vocational.
I'm the first of a lot of children in my family. And we have all kinds of specialties in our family. We have a nurse that we knew was going to be a nurse or something with medicine from the time she was able to talk, because she was going to bandage you or do something to you. We had one who was going to be a pilot if there was an airplane to fly, because he was always zooming and carrying on. There was one, my mother used to say, be sure to turn the pockets out when you go to wash. But we knew if you didn't turn his pockets out, she would know, because there was going to be a piece of wire or nail or something in one of those pockets. He was a technician, a radio technician. You can't say definitely, but pretty early on you can see the bent of an individual. And by high school, to me, it should be possible for a young man to say, yeah, I want to be a carpenter, or I want to be a plumber, I want to be a mason, and then you direct that person to be the best in that field. Now, what does he need? What does a carpenter need? He needs the math. But he will understand it when he has to measure the wood and or count the nails.
It'll
or whatever.
come together
He'll have to. He'll have to. So my attitude to that was, let's stop being so parochial. There has to be a better way of doing this. Now, I'm glad to hear that it is happening. It's a long time it's happening. But that was the genesis of it. And that young man I'm talking about, his name was Solomon Humes. He was a minister of religion at the end, but he was a sweetheart, and he pushed that. It was so obvious that he had this ability and he had the skills. And I have to say, my managing director was cooperative in that. And eventually he went to England for a year, and he did well over there. And then he went on. But that's how that came about.
That's a great story. And I feel confident that with the changes that are being made right now to the Bahamas High School diploma, we're going to have so many more success stories like those, so many more. I know it, we will.
Absolutely. I mean, wouldn't that be awful if everybody was just like me or you?
Yes.
Just imagine everybody sitting around here talking about how you had to hem this or put the zipper in that. That wouldn't make any sense at all. That's temporary. But you want something that's going to make a difference in people's lives. I'm very happy to hear that. That's good news.
Yes, ma'am.
That's good news.
Yes, that's good news. I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to current policymakers in education in the Bahamas, based on your experiences and insights from your tenure as Minister of Education and Youth?
I would say to them, use the people you have wisely. Always accepting that there's somebody who knows something better than you.
And what advice would you give to the students of the Bahamas?
Well, I see some students passing by my gate on a regular basis at 9:30. The first thing I would say is, stop talking about Bahamian time. There is no such thing. The time is Eastern Standard Time or Daylight Savings Time or whatever time, but it's the time that you should be there. It's 9 o'clock, you be there 5 minutes before 9, not 5 minutes after 9. So time, let us learn to be punctual. And that goes for the parents as well, because if the parents are not, then the children are going to be the same. Notwithstanding what the teacher says, the influence from the home is very, very strong. So that's number one, be punctual. Be prepared. If it's necessary to have books or chart, whatever it is, if you don't have them, say to the teacher in front, I'm not going to be able to do this, or my mom isn't able to get that, or whatever. And I know the teachers, my set and before and after, they will make an effort to see that you have what you need. So to the children, be prepared. And thirdly, I would say, be accepting of guidance. These people didn't get old by waking up one morning from being a child and suddenly being an old lady or old gentleman. They lived through many, many experiences on the way to getting to the stage they are. They have knowledge, they have experience, and if they have a good attitude to help you, accept it and thank them for it. Let them know you appreciate it.
Thank you. Dame Ivy Dumont, thank you so much for joining us. Indeed, it was an honor and a pleasure to speak with you today.
Well, I appreciate you coming by. I don't get company very often, but since you all invited yourselves, I decided that I would say yes.
We appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
If you would like to receive frequent updates on what's happening in the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training, subscribe to 819 BMOE, 819-2663. Visit our website or follow us on Facebook. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and other social media platforms. Again, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Lisa Villard.